Just checking, Britt or Nell aren't here yet, right? There's Nell. Wonderful. Welcome. Is Britt here? We'll give Britt a couple more minutes before joining us. But glad you could make it now.
Thank you. Hello.
Wonderful. Did you get the questions?
I just did. I was just looking at them quickly.
Wonderful. Sorry that for some reason you didn't get them earlier, but we'll make it work. So not worried.
It's totally okay. I could have looked for them earlier, but I was like, I'll just review them today. Then I was like, oh, dang, I don't see them.
Give Britt a couple more minutes. I just sent Britt a quick email. Let's see. Just while we're waiting, a couple of housekeeping things. I'll let you know that in the chat, we've put two forms. One is a regular program evaluation form that we would love for you all to fill out. The other is that we've got any QTPOC students who are from the UW-Oshkosh campuses. There's a survey that if you want to fill out, you can. If you don't want to fill out, absolutely fine. But those two things are in the chat. And just sort of the regular things that as the panel is going, we'll ask folk to turn their video and microphones off. You all know the drill. When we get to the question and answer time, more than welcome to put your questions either in the chat, to raise your hand to get in, or just to ask a question. And we look forward to questions. So I'm curious, was Britt able to join us? No. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully she can come as we go. And I think all of us know what a completely challenging time of year we are right now. I don't know about you now, but we've got 2 more weeks of our semester, so a lot of stress here on our campus. And I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us. So for all of you, if you don't know me, my name is Liz Cannon, and I direct our LGBTQ plus resource center here at UW Oshkosh. I also teach in women and gender studies and coordinate our LGBTQ studies certificate. And my pronouns are AM and airs. And our division came together and we're trying to figure out how we can best serve our QT BIPOC students on campus. And we decided we would start, this is like the beginning of a process, with a series of these panels where we are basically talking with QT BIPOC students from all over system about their experiences on their campuses. And this is the fourth one in the series, and they've been wonderful experiences. And I know today is going to be just as wonderful. The program is co-sponsored by the BSU, Division of Academic Support of Inclusive Excellence, Men of Color and Latino Hispanic Initiatives, and Student Achievement Services, and the Women's Center. I'm going to now turn it over to Byron, my cohort, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Byron Adams. I am the director of the Student Achievement Services, which is part of our multicultural retention programs. And my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm excited to be here.
Our first question for you now. Could you introduce yourself, your name, nation, nations, where you're from, labels to describe your sexuality and or gender, what university you are from, and then major, minor, certificate, or anything else you would like to share about yourself?
So, Bujuga Kina, we are Nelly Nindigenous Makere Beneshi Nindigu, Musquabikan Nindunjaba, Gete Ude Nanginda, Magazine and Dudam. So, what I just said is, hi everyone, my name is Nelly, but the spirits know me as, or my Ojibwe name is Makere Beneshi. I'm from Red Cliff, Wisconsin, the Red Cliff Reservation, but I currently live in Superior, Wisconsin, and I'm a part of the Eagle Clan. I'm in my fourth year at UW Superior right now with a major in community health and a minor in health. And I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as pansexual. And I'm also slightly congested now, so I'm sorry.
No worries, you're perfect.
Well, now we're just going to go back and forth with the questions here today. So once again, we can't thank you enough for joining us on this panel today. So as Dr. Cannon mentioned, this is our last series of raising the voices of QT BIPOC students. So as the Division of Academic Support of Inclusive Excellence on the UWO campus, we are searching for ways to make UWO, if not the system campuses, truly inclusive. And we do acknowledge, university system schools are predominantly white institutions. But we wanted to start today's discussion by asking you specifically, Nell, what you see as defining characteristics of the climate of your school in particular, and in what ways does it successfully serve Indigenous students, and in what ways maybe doesn't it serve them?
Okay, so I was thinking about how to answer this question, and I feel like I have to go back to when I first came to UW Superior. I kind of had I mean, everybody has culture shock moving to a new school in a new area and stuff like that, but I guess I never really realized how many people around me weren't Native, because I lived previously, I had only ever lived on my reservation, and the K through 12 school that I went to was majority Native American students. So I think specifically like how I realized, I mean, we know UWS and a lot of the UW schools are all predominantly white universities, but I realized during our freshman year orientation when we did this activity, and it was like diversity within us, I'm pretty sure that's what they call it, and there's just a bunch of little groups of freshmen, and everybody's standing in a circle, and they say like, oh, step forward into the circle if you identify as this, and if you identify as this. And when it came to step into the circle if you identify as Native American, and I was the only person in the circle, and I think that really just stood out to me. And look, well, there was multiple circles around the room, but just I was definitely shocked. And so I think that really started off like you got to see the differences but also the similarities within people. So I think though it took me a while to realize the services like that we have on campus that are available for, well, Indigenous students and LGBTQ plus students. But I think eventually it took me until definitely my second semester. During my whole first semester, I didn't really realize that we had places where I could probably find people who were more similar to me, because I spent a lot of my first semester realizing how different I was from most of the people that I was meeting, because I wasn't meeting very many Native students, LGBTQ plus students, not many along the lines of that. So I think initially I felt, I don't want to say out of place, but like I couldn't find people who were similar to me. But once I did, I realized I think my university does put in the effort to try to give those resources to students, but not really sure.
Well, that's good.
So, in thinking about that first semester, then, were there any spaces that you felt like you could bring all aspects of your identity to bear, including your race, your sexuality, maybe your religion? Was there any space that was possible in?
I kind of went into my first semester of college with a very assertive attitude of I'm going to be myself and exactly myself. I'm not going to hide that from people. And I'm pretty grateful I went at it with that attitude, because during my whole first semester, I really didn't find people who had similar identities to me. Like I had met like other, I would say a few, but not very many during my first semester, other Indigenous students, but I did meet other LGBTQ plus students. So I did feel like I was able to be myself everywhere because I kind of asserted it. Nobody tried to stop me, but I also was very assertive of like, I'm going to be myself and I will continue to do that. So during my first semester, I just did that everywhere. But then during my second semester, I found the Native Nations Student Org on my campus and the Gender Equity Resource Center and the First Nations Center. And then I was like, oh man, these places are pretty cool too.
And then just a kind of a follow-up to that comment, did that come naturally to you in the beginning?
Kind of, yes, because I think I'm pretty assertive as a person in general, but I specifically went into college thinking like, I want people to like me exactly for who I am. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be me. Like, I was very assertive about it because I knew, like, I'm leaving my reservation. This is the only place I've lived my whole life until I went into college. And I knew, I mean, it was still shocking, but I knew it would be different. And I knew I would not be with, for once, the majority of, like, other Native students who I've known my whole life. So I kind of went into it being like, assert yourself, girl, be strong.
That's
So
all.
I think it kind of did come naturally.
Yeah, that's cool. So, in what ways has your experience on campus changed, if any, and maybe from your first semester? And are there any specific incidents that you would like to share about your experiences, maybe on campus or in the classroom, off campus, whatever that looks like?
My experience has changed. I think, like, once I had finally realized about like the resources that we had on campus, and I ended up getting a job on campus my second semester, and I still have that job to this day. I work for the Office of Intercultural Student Success on the First Nations Center, and I think those have changed my experience on campus very positively, because I was initially very assertive of I'm going to be myself even if nobody else is like me. But then when I found these spaces, I was like, hey, there are a few people kind of like me. So I think it has changed my experience for the better.
Sure.
But I can't think of any specific incidents to share off the top of my head.
That's okay.
I'm curious, sort of as a follow-up to that. What I always talk about with my students is that it's really important to see yourself in the curriculum of an institution that you're going to. And LGBTQ studies, I try to make that happen. I teach a course in Two-Spirit Lives that I hope to be teaching again next spring or next fall. And I'm curious, at UW Superior, are there places where you see yourself in the curriculum?
That's it's kind of hard. Okay, so I know like we have the First Nation Studies program, but we didn't have an actual on-campus professor for it for a while, until sometime maybe this past year now that we have one. So there was a while where it was just kind of pending, and I know we had like an online teacher, and that was kind of a little sad that that was kind of an open position for a while. But I don't take any of those classes because it's not related to my major. And specifically, I have experienced in my major, which I take health classes, community public health classes, and anatomy, physiology, all those sorts of things. I have had kind of unfortunate experiences of specifically a human sexuality class, of like my professor not knowing anything about the two-spirit identity and still trying to speak about it a little. It's not like they were trying to teach the whole class all the details, but they said LGBTQ2, and we're just trailing off in the front of the classroom, and I was like, oh no, like what is she gonna say? And she said two feather, and that just hurt my whole soul. And I am assertive, so I did say something, but that whole class went like that, like teaching human sexuality. But to me it felt like, please don't speak about two-spirit people if you don't know anything about them. Like I think there needs to be like a recognition of like, it's okay if professors or certain people don't know that much about Indigenous identities, but they should be able to acknowledge that themselves, and maybe ask somebody else, a speaker or anything who knows more about Indigenous identities, to come in and speak about them. Because I personally don't identify as two-spirit, but I am I'm pansexual, I'm Indigenous, but that doesn't equal two-spirit, and I think that's also an issue. So I think I'm on a tangent. I'm so sorry. I have experienced some unfortunate things, and in that class specifically, the human sexuality class, I did end up doing my final presentation on two-spirit people, and there is the director of equity, diversity, and inclusion at UW Superior does identify as two-spirit, and I even had her be a part of my presentation. So there's some so yeah, try kind of, but not enough, not hard enough. And even just my identity of being pansexual, and aside from being Indigenous, I've had a professor say that like same-sex marriage is not legal in the United States. And I said, yes, it is. It's been since 2016. And they said, no, the book said it's only legal in a few states. And I said, this book was published in 2014. I just am, it was just kind of appalling to me, which is unfortunate because I've had such a great experience, but there's just these few things where I can't shut my mouth because I just, yeah, so my identity, as my different parts of my identity, I feel like aren't represented in the curriculum in the way that I would like.
Thank you for not shutting your mouth. Thank you.
I can't help it.
So I guess, is there anything else about your journey that you would like to share in terms of like decolonization work, resilience, or sources of support and pride you have experienced, just anything in that nature, or just anything about your journey that you want to kind of culminate and surmise for us to share?
I think even though I've had these experiences, I just kind of went on a tangent about, like, there have been some things that have happened negatively, but I'm very grateful for like the resources that I have, because I know not all students would feel comfortable speaking up in class the way that I did. And I'm grateful I have a small class and that I know like my professor, and I felt comfortable enough and safe enough to speak up when I felt like those things were not being accurately taught. So I'm grateful that I feel comfortable with that, but also I'm really, really grateful for the offices that I am actively involved in on campus, like the First Nations Center and the Office of Intercultural Student Success and the Gender Equity Resource Center, because as soon as something would happen in one of my classes and I spoke up and I said something about it, but then I also went and I knew I had somebody I could reach out to say, like, this is not okay. Like, I know I feel comfortable saying something about this, but can you imagine students before me if they felt they knew that was wrong, but they didn't feel comfortable saying something? Like, so I'm very grateful to have found the people who work for those offices and also the Native Nations student org on my campus, because I know I have those people to go to who will at least try to do something about these things that are happening. So I think that's something that I'm really I'm very grateful for that.
It's a component of your higher education experience that you don't necessarily know you need until you kind of get on campus and get involved, and it's not till you kind of like in the mix that you know that you need some of those services and resources sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I'm very grateful for them, because while my first semester here I was still good. It was fun, but like once I found those resources, oh man, I felt like these are my people. This is my place. I do have a place here. So even when my classes don't know anything accurately about my own identity, I know at least there's one place on campus I can go where I'm understood.
That's awesome.
So we have one more question for Nellie, and then we're going to open it up for the rest of you to ask questions. And so start thinking about.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Muted, Liz.
So I did this wonderful little sort of segue that nobody heard. This is our last question for Nellie. And so we're asking everybody to be thinking about your questions, to put in the chat, raise your hand and ask as we ask our last question. And ours is, what do you think are the most important things an Indigenous, queer, trans, and or two-spirit person should know when trying to navigate your campus? And were there things that you wish you had known?
Honestly, I would say I think it's really important for them to try to find, like, depending, I'm sure, like, you guys have these resources just named different things on your own campus. So I think it's very important for Indigenous and queer and two-spirit and all those other identities to find those resources and to try to find those people who understand them, because of course, like, I do have friends of like totally different identities and everything like that, but it's always really nice at the end of the day to know that I have like the First Nation Center and the coordinator of the First Nation Center that I can always go to, and I always have that person working on campus to help do something if something's not right. And yeah, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
Good advice. Do we have questions from the audience? Type in the chat, raise your hand. Enough to start us off. No?
I think there's a few folks typing, Liz.
Oh, wonderful. I can see my chat, so. Yeah, my chat's not working. If you want to go ahead, Byron.
We do have a hand. Anna, you want to go first? Go ahead. And then we'll have a chat question.
I was typing so slowly that I decided to just raise my hand, but my internet's a little bad so with the weather, so hopefully you can hear me okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you being willing to sit with us and to be our only panel member here. I appreciate you being willing to share your experience. I also identify within those two communities as well. So I just wanted to say, even though you're sitting on the panel with your stuff, I'm here also too. Maybe there are others, I don't know. But I'm faculty, and I just wanted to add, I know you talked a little bit about there being a difference between Two-Spirit and being Indigenous and pansexual, and I'm guessing maybe some folks aren't aware of what that difference is, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share more about that.
Thank you. I think it's always nice to know when there are people kind of like, I don't want to say kind of like me out there, but I hope that makes sense. It's nice to meet people with similar identities sometimes. But anyway, yeah, so I'm not an expert on Two-Spirit identities, and I don't want people to think that what I say is 100% like goes for everybody, because I know there's a lot of Two-Spirit people and Indigenous and queer people who might have their own opinions, but from what I understand, I think there's a misconception of a person being Indigenous and queer or anywhere around the LGBTQ, and both of those adding up to equal. That just means they're Two-Spirit, but Two-Spirit is a different identity, and it's kind of the general umbrella term for an identity that has existed for a long time within many Indigenous communities of being, I think it's kind of hard to explain sometimes, because sometimes it's viewed as a third gender, but that's a whole different sort of a story. But I guess Two-Spirit people traditionally had their own sort of roles that they would play in their own communities, instead of being like, you know, women played a certain role, and then people who, they just played a separate role. And oh man, I'm so sorry, I feel pressure. I swear I'm usually pretty good at this, but so Two-Spirit people typically
I could help
played.
if
Yeah, I need help. I'm so
it
sorry.
would be helpful. I'm happy to jump in and help. No, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot by asking that, but I know that it is an interesting distinction because you could literally have any identity within the LGBT spectrum and use the term two-spirit for yourself, right? But not everybody
Yeah.
sees it that way, and not everybody wants to use that word because maybe something else fits better. And also, like you talked about, it often does come with a specific role within our communities or within our spirituality or whatever, right? And so sometimes that word is used more to kind of indicate that, and other times people use it more generally. So I think it can be both of those things. So I just wanted to kind of, I guess, add that piece in there and see. And I don't know if we have another question, but maybe I can ask a different question to follow up about your experience. I'm wondering if you might talk about, like, if you've had any experiences of positive or negative, like whether it's been feelings of inclusion or feelings of, or like experiencing like prejudice, like homophobia, or just even confusion around the term pansexual or things like that within your home community.
Home community as in like my reservation, or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel I'm pretty grateful because I don't think I've had much of prejudice against being pansexual, but I also know that there's always like people are assumed to be straight unless said otherwise. And so when I went to college and I met my girlfriend, like we've been dating since my freshman year of college, people kind of have said things like, now she went to college and she's a lesbian. And I'm like, okay, well, if you ever knew anything about me, actually, I've always been pansexual and that's been my identity. Just because I have a girlfriend now doesn't mean I was straight and now I'm a lesbian. There just seems to be like a lack of understanding in that sort of sense. But those are just the things, unfortunately, that I have been told that people say to my friends, but nobody would ever say that to me. As to this day, nobody said that to me. But I've been told that's been said, and I think that's unfortunate, but I think that probably happens with many people in different communities when they go to college or they move or they have new experiences, and people think like, oh, you've changed, and I think that's looked at in a negative way, and I don't think that change necessarily has to be negative. So I haven't personally experienced much prejudice, but I have been told of things being said which I don't let affect me that much because I know who I am and I know who I have always been. So I think that's kind of how I go at those situations.
We did just have one comment from Nicole who says, "Now, thanks for sharing your experiences with us, and I appreciate your time." Smiley face.
Thank you.
Amy says thank you as well.
Do you have any more questions? Or did you want to say something else now?
I was going to go off of what I was just saying. This is kind of just something that I know I've experienced as an Indigenous person leaving my reservation to go to college, which sounds so kind of cliche, but I just repeated myself. I know other Indigenous students who have experienced the same thing, and whether they're LGBTQ plus or not, but there's kind of this thing that happens with Indigenous students going to universities and colleges of people kind of come at you with an attitude of, well, now that you went to college, you think you're better than me. And there's kind of this weird thing of, I know multiple people from different reservations, when they go back to their reservation, people are like, oh, you've been gone, you think you're better than us now because you're going to college and you're going and doing these things. And so that doesn't relate to being LGBTQ plus, but that's just something that I know a lot of Indigenous students experience. And I think that's pretty sad because I know I was encouraged a lot by people in my community, like, oh, go to college, do it. And then there's also this other hand of people who are like, so you think you're better than us now because you go to college and because you went and did this? And I don't know where that attitude stems from, but I just know that's a common problem that I've heard other people talk about, and I just felt like it should be brought up as well.
Good point. Thank you for sharing that with us. I had another question if nobody else right now does. I'm wondering, there's sort of two concepts that we've heard talk about, the idea of coming out, which seems to be a pretty typical sort of Western white tale of what we do as LGBTQ folk, right? That we have to come out and tell people who we are. But there's another concept of coming in, which has to do with, as we recognize ourselves, the community also recognize the self, and that we come into who we are within the community and the cultures within that community. I'm wondering if either of those terms resonates with you in any way.
I've never heard of people coming in instead of out, but I think that definitely resonated with me a lot more because I never had to come out. I don't mean to do that, but like people have asked me about that and I never experienced that because I think I've just always been open about, I like people like for who they are and not their gender identity or anything like that. So I've always known that, and I've talked to my mom and family about that because I kind of grew up thinking that's what everybody felt, and I later found out no, it's not. So I'm grateful that my immediate family has always been like, you can like whoever you want as long as they're not a horrible person, I suppose. So I kind of just thought that's how everything was like. So I guess I identify more with the like coming into who I am as a person because I've always known I'm like this, and I kind of just feel like, I don't know, I didn't have to come out. I definitely just like came into who I have always been.
Amni.
I'm talking a lot, so you can feel free to dismiss me if you need to. I just wanted to add in about coming in that concept comes from Indigenous cultures, and it's the concept of coming into the circle. So that idea is like you come fully into the circle of your, of your people when you are all of who you are. And so I think it's, it's a little bit of a different process in that way. But as far as I know, that's where it originated. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it originates in within Indigenous communities.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Anything else from you, Byron?
No, this has been very enlightening. I've gotten a new concept on some things, and I've learned a few new things. So this was really good for me personally.
Wonderful. Anything else you'd like to share, Nellie?
Not that I can think of.
Right. Well, we cannot thank you enough for joining us today on, a busy day, a busy time of the semester, and sharing part of who you are with us. So thank you very, very much. Just a quick reminder to the audience that there is our evaluation form. If you could fill that out about the program, that would be fantastic. And again, if anybody is QT and on one of the 3 UW Oshkosh campuses, there's also a survey there that we're hoping folks would like to fill out. So thank you everybody for joining us, and especially thank you, Nell, for being here with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Liz, I don't see the links in the chat.